turned on their phones. And so now the conversation has turned to, why aren't there sirens installed in this county that has a riverbank that is in a floodplain, a known floodplain, a place that is called Flash Flood Alley, and that's something that we've heard state officials say it's a conversation to have now, and the money needs to be found immediately to start installing that sort of a system. We'll be watching, John, to see exactly when that actually happens. If the money's there, then how quickly can they get those sirens up for another potential event?
All right, NBC News national correspondent Aaron Gilchrist reporting live from Kerrville, Texas. Thank you very much for your reporting. There was also deadly flash flooding yesterday in New Mexico. 3 people, including a 7-year-old boy, were killed in the southern New Mexico town of Ruidoso, where floodwaters triggered by monsoon rains trapped people in their cars and homes, and at one point swept away entire houses. NBC News correspondent Steve Patterson joins us now from New Mexico. Steve, what is the latest there?
Yeah, Mika, this was simply too much rain in just too short of a time span in an area that is completely covered in burn scars. This is what happens when you have monsoon-like conditions over a burn scar. And we've had these fires, multiple fires, as early as last year. The same sort of scenario played out, and now it's happening again, and this time it is deadly. And I want to just show you around the sun recently coming up. I mean, you see the car into the home behind me, but look at this. There should be homes where I'm pointing in the foreground, but you see the devastation as far back really as you can see in this area, and then it butts up against the Ruidoso River, which really crested almost 5 inches higher than its record, which is just unbelievable to think about how high this river was. 8 inches, almost every 80 minutes or so. Incredible to think about the amount of water that was being dumped on this area, and again, because of the South Fork fire, that fire killing 2 people, burning up hundreds of homes, created these burn scars that led to deadly fires after that fire, led to deadly flooding, after that fire a year ago, and now a year later, another sort of set of tragedy here. 3 people, as you mentioned, killed in this fire, a 4-year-old girl, a 7-year-old boy, a man 40 to 50. We don't know if there was relation between the victims. There will be a press conference maybe in the next few hours or so. We should learn more there, but until then, this community already grieving, as we've seen neighbors just starting to sort of pick up the pieces here. Mika.
All right, we'll be watching for that press conference. Steve Patterson, thank you very much for your reporting this morning. And coming up on the 4th hour of Morning Joe, investors are monitoring President Trump's latest updates to his tariff policy, as he has promised to roll out further developments this morning. We'll take a look at Wall Street's reaction ahead of this morning's opening bell. And a reminder that the Morning Joe podcast is available each weekday, featuring our full conversations and analysis of the news. You can listen wherever you get your podcasts.
In the Trump administration, they're going to have a straight flush with this one.
Yeah, but they also have...
Looking at this from a supernatural perspective, he talks about, and I've talked about this before, sadly, that God will throw us off into a sick bed in the first part of Revelations, talking to the churches. And of course, the next level of wrath, we're going to use the word wrath today. And once more, it's not that God desires or wants to do this, it's that he basically feels cornered in doing this, is the fact that once it reaches a level that even the sick bed, because, I mean, you got to think about this. Every time there's a disaster like that, it breaks loose lines, it opens up gas lines, it opens up oil, contaminants. And it doesn't matter if it's dead fish, it doesn't matter if it's, it disturbs the ecosystem in that area. You're going to have animals, raccoons, squirrels, rabbits. I mean, you're going to have all kinds of stuff that's going to be laying around, carcasses that's going to be dead. That he will throw us off into a sick bed, that once the level of sick bed don't get our attention strong enough and long enough, then he'll throw us off into great tribulation whenever he said that he will return back in flaming fire, taking vengeance upon them who know not him and upon them who know not the gospel. But getting back to the area that is prone of flooding, I have thought about it, and I'm thinking, well, why couldn't they put up a dam, some sort of like a levee? And I thought, well, that wouldn't work necessarily unless they had a roadway that they could, divert the traffic or go into a road structure that would be more than just a dam, that would have doors on it that would open and shut, because at any given time, whenever it's regular rainfall, I'm pretty sure that area probably has a creek bed, and it probably stays pretty well wet all the time, or a river, and you wouldn't want to dam up the actual river. But at the same time, if it was a massive amount of water coming down through there, 30 feet of water, why couldn't they have built a dam to where they could have shut all the doors on the dam that would help to have held back that water at that particular point? Now, observing the Corps of Engineers in the past years that I've been observing these floods, especially up and down the Mississippi River, sometimes the Corps of Engineers will have to make a drastic choice in flooding or allowing for a certain particular area, a particular community to flood, kind of like over in Missouri. I know I've seen that happen before, where they basically tell everybody to get out because there's no way of being able to restrain all the water unless they do flood certain areas in that particular area. And the Corps of Engineers, this really falls upon the feet of the Corps of Engineers pertaining to the United States government, pertaining to the catastrophe that has recently hit in Texas, due to the fact that there has not been, extra protection, knowing that this was a floodplain area. A floodplain alley is what they're calling it. One of the third most prone areas of having flash floods. But listening to what went on in New Mexico pertaining to the floods, I don't doubt that one bit, pertaining to the terrain that New Mexico has, because I was in New Mexico and I seen that from my own eyes. And the sad thing about living in those hills in New Mexico, it can be raining 50 miles north or 100 miles north. I'm talking about coming just an absolute downburst, a deluge, and where you was at in the creek bed didn't have a drop of rain, and there would be no way that you would know that they just got to receiving 10 inches of rain just up above you, and the next thing you know, here comes this usher of water comes through there that basically will destroy any and everything, and basically you only have like seconds, if that, to get out of there. You got to run for your lives. Literally run for your lives. You won't even have time to get into an automobile, because that's like 15 seconds that you've done already delayed, that you should have been running on your feet, if you can. Those that's in wheelchairs and those that's already in assisted living, they're basically doomed. You talk about vulnerable, or the elder, or children. They're very vulnerable in a situation like this. So my advice would be for the Corps of Engineers to tighten up. And I don't know who runs the Department of Corps of Engineers. I know it's a federally designed area. We want to look at FEMA. We want to look at other federal agencies. But to me, they need to build some sort of a structure in case this happens on the upper end, because they'll know what way the rain flows, or what way the water flows. Water always flows to the lower end. Gravity takes over. And maybe they could at least prevent some of that from occurring that would not be that bad. Now, would that mean that they would have to flood the upper areas? if you lived in the northern part, because it is a flood-prone area, possibly. I don't know. I mean, people's going to have to really sit down, and they're going to have to really look at these things that's in these low-lying areas, because it's obvious that these deluges ain't going away. A matter of fact, last night they had flooding. They had to shut down portions of the Dan Ryan last night in Cook County, Illinois. Plus, there was flooding in North Carolina pertaining to a tropical storm that come up through there, and some of the areas that got hit last year pertaining to the flood got hit again this year. I don't know how bad it was, but the point that I'm trying to make is this: people need to awaken. No longer being climate deniers, but people need to awaken in what's happening here. Because we have basically changed the dynamics of the ecosystem to the degree that the atmosphere above our heads, called the loft, is hotter than normal, and because of it, the moisture goes up quicker and it holds more moisture, and then whenever it does release it, it releases it in the form of a deluge because it can't hold it up there no longer. We're disproportionalizing the ecosystem. The ecosystem above our heads, we're disproportionalizing the ecosystem below our feet. And of course, it's all part of the prophecies that, and this should be even that much more of a validating scenario in stating the fact that the Bible does say to flee into the mountains. Well, why did he say to flee into the mountains? Because he knew that humanity was going to make a mess of this thing down here, and he knew that there was going to be imbalances pertaining to the forces of nature that man was making. And of course, if you enhance that on a supernatural level pertaining to Satan coming down in great wrath, and if you also correspond that with the prophecy that as you shall see the days approaching, that no flesh shall be saved, but for the elect's sake he will shorten those days because of the catastrophes that are going to keep bombarding the planet Earth because of what Satan has done pertaining to bamboozling the Homo sapiens down here, and I still point my finger at a great deal of OPEC pertaining to oil, the oil typhoons that's been draining oil now out of the ground now for about 125, 140 years since they first become incorporated. We are 30 years in behind the goalpost of where we should be right now because of the delay tactics of people thinking that they was going to be able to stop prophecy from occurring. I've never in my life, looking at it from my perspective, I've never seen anything so preposterously crazy, just absolutely crazy, that the people in Northwest Tennessee, and it began in Washington, D.C., pertaining to the Bushes and the Reagans, of biblical Bible prophecy that God spearheaded through one of his messengers, which is myself, and people didn't pay no attention to it. They was talking out of both sides of their mouth. They talked about peace. You know, peace sounds like a very elegant word, doesn't it? Peace sounds like a very tranquil, elegant word. But that's all it is peace if people don't act upon it. And the only way to truly act upon it is to go back, like it talks about in the first part of Revelations, and do thy first works over again. If not, we're going to continue to see horrible, horrible, horrible things. And we may have already crossed over the Rubicon to the degree that we won't be able to reverse a great deal of the forces of nature, because I mean our oceans are warming up. There's parts of the ocean that you can go down into that don't make good sense pertaining to the oceans going down deeper. The warmer the water becomes. There's stuff that's going on right now that is absolutely baffling scientists and meteorologists all over the world, baffling them. And until we push aside those that want to still claim that climate is a hoax, people like Donald J. Trump that wants to be a climate denier, until we push that ideal to the side and say, you know what, we should have listened to Al Gore along about the year 2000, whenever Al Gore had already done micromanaged what was going on all over the world, because I'm pretty sure he probably had a team of people that sat down and looked at the internet, and they were seeing these fluctuations or these imbalances that was happening all over the world on all 7 continents. And because of it, they come to the conclusion that, hey, guess what? And this was 20-something years ago that they know that it was occurring. They actually suspicioned it going to be occurring in the 70s. Because scientists and meteorologists went to the White House and said, you know what, this is what's going to happen if we continue on this same path. And it was basically overruled or ignored. Well, now look at the price that we're paying for that. We're paying a hefty price because of that. So whenever I talk about the oil companies, a lot of them need to be arrested. I'm sure a lot of them done what they done maybe out of ignorance, unintentionally, but some of them knew. They knew the damages that they was doing to the planet, and because of it, they should be held to the fullest extent of the law. And I know the devil and the devil's people over in Saudi Arabia, I know that they knew what was going to occur because they read the Bible. They know what the Bible says. They knew that Jesus, even though they don't acknowledge Jesus as Jesus being the Son of God or God himself in the flesh, they know that God's Son was who God's Son was. All this time they have been resisting. The resisting factor hadn't just come from America. The resisting factor has been a worldwide resisting factor. And it is now putting everybody in behind the 8 ball. And what's even more tragic, you got something like 200 nations, right? A lot of these poor countries, they're already struggling. They either don't have the education, or they don't have the manpower, or they don't have the resources to be able to do anything about the problems that they're involved in, caught in between a hard place and a rock, kind of like all the islands down in the Philippines, and anybody that's coastal, seeing the water rising pertaining to the oceans. It's so sad because they're basically paying part of the bill pertaining to what the superpowers have done. The bigger nations, India, America, Canada, Mexico, Russia, China. I mean, I could go on and on with the bigger ones. Let's say the first 30 bigger ones, which I'd put America right there on top. That now these other little smaller countries are going to have to pay the price because of what the bigger countries have done. So whenever, and I want to emphasize upon this very carefully, I want you to understand what I'm saying. Whenever people like President Putin over in Russia make statements of the reason why that he basically initiated that illegal attack upon to Ukraine, pertaining to declaring war upon to his own people, pertaining to it being an internal, basically like a civil war deal. Whenever he says that they have been cheated, he's not lying. They're not lying. And the reason why that they've been cheated is because of all the delay tactics that's become over here in America, that nobody wanted to listen to the founder of the Windmill Ministries missions. They had already made up their mind. Well, we're gonna play a delay tactic. We're gonna play time out here, and we feel like that we can outbeat Mr. Jackson pertaining to playing this delay time tactic. That we won't support him. We won't get in behind him. We won't listen to him. We're going to continue to ignore him, even though it was God that anointed him with the message, that spearheaded the message to begin with. So what has went on here goes beyond a travesty. It really does. This was done intentionally, and now the innocent people are having to pay the consequences on account of it. It is the most saddest part of life that I think that I've ever experienced in my life.
move down the road, the markets are trying to reprice and remodel what the tariffs mean and how they're going to affect everything from consumer spending to inflation to economic growth, and that's a continuing process. You see the fear and the greed, the manic sell-off we had in April, and now this manic rally.
See, I want to tell you what these tariffs are doing. It's awakening a lot of people towards what's going on, but it's also creating panic, okay? And what Donald Trump is trying to do, he's trying to straighten this out over here in America towards beating the horse on the wrong end by thinking that he's going to be able to bring the manufacturing back over to America like it was back in the 60s, 70s, and the 80s. By basically punishing all these other countries and making them pay a stiffer price, which once more is going to add insult to injury pertaining to the problems that they're already dealing with. They're already dealing with problems, and now you're going to raise the price of bread on their tables over there? And the thing about raising the price of the bread over there, it's also raising the price of prices over here. So what benefit is that other than saving the rich and once more putting the blame upon to the innocent, the shoulders of the innocent that can't absorb this? The working class, the poor class, those that's already struggling. I mean, there's no doubt. There was a travesty committed back in the late 80s pertaining to the Reagans and the Bushes. A great travesty was committed that now various countries are going to be basically sucked down the tubes because of their position, because of their finances, because of certain circumstances. They'll be some of the first ones that'll suffer the worst. And it doesn't matter if you're coastal, it doesn't matter if you're island, it doesn't matter, because now we're seeing these imbalances that are unlike anything that scientists or meteorologists has ever even thought about thinking about. In other words, our worst nightmare is now beginning to start to come true. They talk about, the United Nations talks about the extinction of mankind. They're not lying. This isn't some sort of a fantasy or some sort of a scare tactic. This is really happening in our lives. Just like the gun violence over here in America, just like the drug overdoses here in America, just like all the other problems that we're seeing here in America towards being $37 trillion in debt. These ain't fantasies. These ain't ideologies. These are actual facts that's going on pertaining to our reality. Now, whether or not you want to accept the reality of what the reality is, where we're living at today, well, that'll be up to you, you know. I mean, you can still be like Donald J. Trump, walk around and be in a climate denier and say, oh, I don't believe none of that stuff. Oh, no, drill, baby, drill, drill, drill. And the thing about it is, it's the drilling that has gotten us in this trouble, pertaining to draining all the resources out of the ground, in addition to polluting the atmosphere above the clouds pertaining to the loft. That's creating the deluges. We are suffering on account of bad decisions that has been made going back 30, 40, 50, maybe even further than that, of people that should have raised a red flag to these things that didn't. So why would somebody such as myself not want to hold the oil tycoon, Mega, Shell, Exxon, Valviv, and etc.? Why wouldn't we want to hold them accountable and responsible? Just like all the manufacturing that left America. It was the Walton family that put Mr. Walton on national TV during Mr. Bush's, old man Senior Bush, during his administration, that said, America first, we will always sell America, we will always build America, we will always sell from America. But as soon as the old man kicked the bucket, what did the family do? What did their investors do? What did the rest of those that was in power do? They stabbed America in the back, and they had access to those computers, and they could see where they could get Hanes underwear made for pennies on a dollar in comparison to what it was going to cost to make the same Hanes underwear over here in America. So because of it, hey, they seen the jiggle, they seen the jago, they seen the glitter of the gold, and they all went towards it. The bad thing about Walmart, whenever they done this to be able to struggle to get ahead, they was steadily chopping and harming mama papa businesses. They was even attacking a lot of their competitors. Today, now Amazon has stood up towards being a competitor to Walmart, which I'm glad to see, because it helps keep people honest. But whenever you have a monopoly like that that's going on right in front of your very eyes, once Walmart has enough stores and starts producing or starts bringing in enough produce or whatever, clothing or whatever, then they can basically demand what they want to charge. That's called a monopoly. That's supposed to be illegal in America. And that's exactly what the Walton family has done to the American people. They have created a monopoly in cornering the market. And now they can basically, depending upon where they're at, they can basically put whatever price label that they want to on whatever item that they have. That's supposed to be illegal. The sad thing about what Walmart done, the rest of them followed pursuit. Why? Because of the good old American internet, the computer. That's the reason why I was telling Mr. Biden that the American people, in a sense, got the cart in front of the horse, that we was doing real good in the 60s, 70s, after World War II, the 50s, during the transition of the smokestack industry days. We was doing real good whenever it come to us competing with different countries in us picking and choosing who that we was competing with. But whenever it spread abroad after the 80s, during the Reagan and the Bushes, whenever the Cold War finally stopped, and they created a new alliances pertaining to the Atlantic and the Pacific alliances, towards now, instead of us functioning with maybe, let's say, 10 countries, 10 of the biggest countries, now we started functioning with all the countries. Because the internet was so available, now people that was buyers could say, well, why do we want to pay somebody for a package of Hanes underwear $8, and we'll have to sell it for $16 to be able to make a profit, whenever we can get the same package of underwear from, let's say, Venezuela or Honduras or wherever, another country, for pennies on a dollar, that now we can keep our productivity the same, we can keep our revenue pertaining to what we gain back on these sales the same, if not more. They can actually make more, and plus they can bring the price down to where it won't be such of a snag to the American pocketbook. Well, that's what they done. That's exactly what they done. And that's also the reason why that these big shipment yards have grown in such proportionally in the past 30 plus years, because it was such of a predominant business towards taking resources that was made in Honduras and now putting them on a shipping lane and bringing them over here, or putting them on a shipping lane and bringing them to Spain, or putting them on a shipping lane and bringing them wherever. What irks me about that is that they were so greedy and selfish, they wasn't looking at the consequences that they was going to be causing by shutting down not only the mama papa businesses that couldn't compete with people like Walmart, but they were shutting down factories. They were shutting down shoe factories. They were shutting down Hanes underwear factories. They were shutting down these things in America to the degree that now our younger generation either has to travel, or they have to move, or they have to just do without. No wonder they resorted to drugs. No wonder they resorted to crime. No wonder that they're doing the things that they're doing towards the homeless and the problems that we're having over here in America. The rich people, the mega people, have done this to us. And it's not just the oil mega people. that is draining the resources and polluting the atmosphere and poisoning the water and poisoning the air, but it's all the above. And until we get our minds wrapped around this and what it's going to take to straighten this out, and whenever I say we got the cart in front of the horse, looking at it from an international standpoint, global standpoint, I mean just exactly that. We got the cart in front of the horse. And it's causing all kinds of problems. And now look what they're talking about right here is part of major layoffs.
Yes.
That in part quote, if a president runs roughshod over the carefully crafted statuses that authorize and animate the federal government, as the district court's preliminary findings show to be likely happening here, he discards and disables the democratic system that created those laws.
There you go. Basically, trying to correct a problem by creating more of a problem, by putting the burden off onto the laborers or the mid class, the second class, and the third class citizens, that now they're trying to save the rich, is what they're trying to do. They're trying to make sure that the rich is still stable. The bad thing about it is, it was the powerful and the rich, it was the mega that done this to us to begin with. Out of greed, out of selfishness, out of not looking through the crystal glass and saying, well, what if we do this and all of us pursue doing it at the same time? What are we going to do to the infrastructure pertaining to the labor force over here in America? They didn't think that through, now did they? Or if they did, they didn't care. And now our children and our children's children and possibly their children is going to have to pay the price. Now, people that get a hold of my videos, in which I don't have a whole lot of people that listen to me, and which that's fine. But I feel like it's not the volume of the people that's listening to me, but it's who's listening to me that makes all the difference in the world pertaining to the things that I've been telling them about now for the past few years are now coming true. They're all coming true. No questions asked. I haven't said nothing in exchange towards what is going to occur that hasn't already started occurring. Going all the way back to 2005, whenever I made a prediction on a t-shirt of a bloody road ahead, and then a few years later started passing out information about a major electrical disturbances to come, and sure enough, the electrical grid services here in America has taken it on the cheek. And of course, what do? Well, they're a powerhouse. They're not gonna basically go broke. So they take their losses and they apply them back to their consumers, back to their customer base. So ultimately, who's winning? Nobody. Nobody's winning. We're all going broke. We may be keeping the megas still in power, but in the meantime, while we're keeping them in power, we're going under. And if enough of us goes under, I promise you, the megas will go under too. Now, the only thing that I can say that Donald Trump is doing, he's delaying, once more, using these delay tactics. He's delaying the inevitable towards not only America, but the world basically having to reset itself in these adjustments that's gotten too far out of focus as far as the imbalances that's happening right now. Okay? Well, you can do that financially, politically speaking, you can do that, but in the meantime, you still got corruption, you still got sin, you still got dishonesty, you still got greed, and you still got the forces of nature that are responding and reacting because of these things. Now, friends, I can't be adamant enough in explaining to you that we are at a critical stage right now. We are at the crossroads. Like I said, we're being thrown off into those sick beds that it talks about in the first part of Revelations, talking to the 7 churches. To repent, 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 or else I will throw thee off into a sick bed. In other words, God the Father is allowing for, well, sort of like being the devil's advocate, or allowing for the devil to basically attack us the way that he's attacking us through these supernatural events, just like the Bible talks about, that Satan will come down in great wrath because he knoweth his time is short. We're going to have to awaken to what has happened, what is happening, and what we are to do to prevent it from happening. If not, it is going to be the extinction of humanity and the planet. And if that's the direction that the world wants to go in, well, then continue to do what you've been doing, and you'll see grief and despair and agony like you could not ever, ever begin to imagine. I mean, whenever you look at the news, and which I know a lot of people don't like to watch the news because it is so depressing. But whenever you look at the news and you see children over in the Gaza Strip pretending to the Palestinian people that's basically starving to death. We're talking about children. Their bones is malnutrition. Their bodies is malnutrition. They're in a state right now of sickness that if you was to start feeding all of them right now with all the 5 major food groups and do so adequately, there's a lot of them that won't never recover from the damages that's been done to their bodies. Never recover. In other words, it's damaged organs, it's damaged their mind, it's damaged bones, it's damaged various things in their body, and they won't never recover from that. A great deal of them will never recover from that. Even as children. Even if you was to start pumping food to them right now, give them all the vitamins that you could think of, and stick with the major 5 food groups, the damages are being severely done. And to watch that happening in the 21st century, to me, is sickening. It was bad enough in seeing the things that was going on over in Africa in the 20th century, back in the 60s and the 70s, whenever we could see massive starvation and people that couldn't fend for themselves, and people that was basically out of touch with reality. I'm going to use that word, out of touch with reality. You know, we can send them $250 million worth of condoms, but once more, you're beating the horse on the wrong end regarding to trying to reform them people. The only way that you can reform a group of people, I'm going to use the Afghanistan people as an example of this, is that you have to go in with the supernatural and allow for the supernatural to reform their thinking, to reform their desires, to reform who they actually are, inwardly speaking, before you're ever going to reform them outwardly. It's kind of like whenever Jesus used the illustration of the cup, because they was chastising him because he didn't wash his hands. And the way that they was looking at it was formality-wise, that you was supposed to do this, this, and this, and this. You know, my son got hung up on formalities towards going to the Catholic Church, and now he's realizing, even questioning me not too long ago, a few days ago, about I've been praying to God the wrong way. I said, how you feel, how you say that? And he told me about trespasses versus sins, using it in the Lord's Prayer. I said, Nicholas, I said, you're still using formalities in trying to have a relationship with the Heavenly Father. I said, you cannot have a relationship with the Heavenly Father off of formalities. You got to be sincere. You got to be authentically sincere to truly be able to talk to God. And you don't do so in a formality form. Now, granted, whenever it talks about forgive us of our trespasses, love thy enemy, turn thy cheek, and all that other stuff, there's certain barriers there that we are to still love our enemies, but you don't have to love what your enemy has done, because obviously your enemy has become your enemy for a reason. And even though he or she is your enemy, doesn't mean that you wish hellfire and brimstone and condemnation upon that person's soul. Because to wish for somebody's soul to go to hell is wrong, and it's awful. It's wrong and it's awful. And no matter what a person has done to you, and I know this sounds incredibly stupid or hard, we have to maintain the same type of concept in looking at it in different ways, in a 3-dimensional, 4-dimensional, 5-dimensional way, towards Father, forgive them for they know not what they do. But once more, Christ was not talking about everybody that was in that group of people, because there was certain people in that group of people that thought that they knowed exactly what they was doing towards doing away with the Lord Jesus Christ. But Lord God, was they ever deceived on that third day whenever he rose from the grave. Some of them that was doing what they was doing it out of fear. And some of them that was doing what they was doing was actually doing it out of ignorance. Those was the people that Christ was talking about, Father, forgive them for they know not what they do. See, Christ had a 3-dimensional, 4-dimensional, 5-dimensional mind, that he could separate the differences between the fleshly and the spiritual. He knowed the differences between the two. And until you become, I guess the right word would be converted, in being able to determine the differences between the two, and until you practice that in your everyday life, the odds are you're going to be as lost as a goose in the middle of a you-know-what kind of storm. And I hate to say that, but even Christ emphasized that if the blind lead the blind, they shall both leadeth off into the ditch. We've been led off into the ditch, my friends. We have been led off into a state of destitute. We're basically under I'm trying to think of the right biblical word to use. We're not necessarily in prison, but these inflictions that has fallen up into our lives is affecting us to the degree that we're basically kind of like the children of Israel towards being in bondage. We're in bondage. Bondages. We're in bondages towards being able to prosper. We're in bondages towards being able to see our children prosper. We're in bondages towards the things that used to be considered good. Now, throw that out the door because somebody has basically bankrupted or kidnapped or held as ransom pertaining to the mega rich and the powerful and the famous. I understand what Donald Trump is trying to do. He's trying to keep the megas alive as long as possible, but in reality all he's doing is delaying the inevitable, because eventually we will have to default. There's no way that these tariffs are going to straighten this problem out. If anything, what the tariffs are going to do, they're going to create more problems, and if it doesn't create the problems for us, it will create the problems for the third world countries, the smaller countries, to the degree that it's going to take their suffering and even going to add more suffering to their already injustices that's occurring in their lives, because they didn't have nothing to do with the mega oil producing tycoons until just recently. See, they was kind of way behind times whenever it come to competing on a global level. Well, now since these actors have now got on the same internet, the same transportation vehicle, they finally awakened. I mean, you can go to China and actually, go to Africa and actually see where there's places of Africa that is doing almost as good as China or America pertaining to the 21st century. But then there's always going to be those hidden barriers pertaining to those that are out in the villages, and those that are in the swamps, and those like in South America. You got people that was associated with the Mayans back thousands of years ago, that they're living primitive, and they don't want to have nothing to do with modernization pertaining to humanity, because they see what it's doing to us. It's bringing harm. It's bringing hurt. We're choking one another. We're stabbing one another in the backs. We're poisoning our water. We're poisoning our air. We're being selfish, and we're basically bringing destruction up into our own lives. Why would a group of people, regardless whether it was a group of people in wherever, want to exchange their lifestyle for ours whenever they're doing just fine with their own. Similar towards what went on over here in America whenever the Europeans come over here and basically tried to desecrate, genocide the Indian people over here in America. Now look what it's gotten us. Look what the white man has done to the land, not just in trying to destroy the indigenous people, but now they're bringing destruction into their own. And I know this message isn't a predominant message. I know to some people it's going to sound very depressing. It's going to sound negative. But I'm trying to be a straight shooter in telling you where we're at, where we're going to continue to be at, and what is going to be the ultimate goal if we stay on the trajectory that we're on right now. And I think a lot of people that does listen to what I got to say can agree that what Mr. Jackson is talking about is hitting the money on the head. We can't do nothing about what's already been done, per se, regarding the past. But what we do have control over is what we do in the future. Because what we do from this moment on is going to be the determining factor in what's going to happen to our children and our children's children, especially if we don't do anything different than what we're doing right now. We see what the consequences are going to be. What kind of a group of people is that? That's sadistic, if you ask me. That's horrifying.
Last 24 hours. Now 3 people have reportedly died so far, including 2 small children. Officials say the Rio Ruidoso River had risen more than 20 feet, even sweeping away an entire house. Now there's no word yet on how many people are still missing from that area. And how about this? So a newly published study now revealing that the health of...
Okay, so what they're talking about was on the Rio Grande River, on the northern end, that, like I said, they got the hills and the hollers, and the terrain is so unlevel up there that you can literally be on one side of the mountain and not have a clue that there's a cloud in the sky up above you 50 to 75 miles, but the way that water flows, it flows downhill, and if you're not on top of your game towards getting the heck out of there and having good proper warning system and knowing that this is coming down the pike, you could be caught off guard real quick, and the next thing you know, there's no way humanly possible that you're going to be able to hardly survive it unless it's just by the grace of God. And what I took notice while I was up there in that area around Taos, around areas called the Circle of Enchantment, in the northern part of New Mexico, what I took notice was that a lot of the people that did live in a low-lying area usually had their houses on stilts. 10-foot stilts, 12-foot, 20-foot stilts, maybe even higher than that, because that was the recorded level of where the last recording major flood was. So they consider that the floodplain, right? Well, whenever you have massive amount of moisture coming out of the sky pertaining to a deluge, you may want to erase that playing field and rise it up another 4, 5, 6, maybe 10 feet. In other words, the statistics that they're going by are old statistics pertaining to normal rains, natural rains. But now today, we're no longer dealing with normalcy, we're dealing with abnormalcy, and instead of putting your house on a 20-foot stilt, pretty close to a low-lying area, you probably need to go on up another 10 foot. Instead of putting in a 2-foot cover in diameter, you probably need to put in a 4-foot cover in diameter. Now, I realize that's going to cost more money. I realize that a 2-foot diameter, 20-foot cover is going to cost probably about half the amount of money that a 4-foot, 20-foot cover is going to cost. But which is more important? Money our lives. Because if you have a 4-foot covert that can obtain that type of volume, even though you may not use it but once, or twice, we rather have it not need it than to need it not have it. That's what I base basically almost everything off of. You know, you always hope for the best, but at the same time, while you're hoping for the best, you always expect the worst. That way you're never caught off guard. That way you won't be blindsided. People like me, Al Gore, other people was trying to tell these people these things. Other environmentalists was trying to tell these people these things, and it was ignored. It wasn't listened to. And now we're paying the consequences. I just pray to God that we will awaken before it is too late, that hopefully we haven't done crossed over the Rubicon to the degree that it's basically a hopeless situation for all of us. I don't think it is. I would like to believe that it's not. But I don't know. There's certain areas, depending upon where you live, that you may already be doomed, pertaining to if you're on a coastlining area, or if you're in an island, or if you live in the Philippines or whatever. I mean, it's a possibility that threshold has already done. You done went over the Rubicon, and the only answer for you now would be for you to move completely out of your country and to go to another country. Because the boat is sinking, pertaining to the oceans rising, and until we're smart enough to stop this, which the first thing is awareness. The first thing is accepting reality for what reality is. And if you're not willing to do that, then you are doomed. These nudges, these slaps in the faces, these ravaging events that's occurring to us are signs, according to the Bible. And if we're not smart enough to identify the signs, then maybe we are a doomed society. Like I said, I would like to not believe that. I would rather believe that we are smart enough, supposedly being the most smartest species on the planet, but in the meantime, we're poisoning the water, we're poisoning our air, we got all kinds of problems. You know, I was just told yesterday on the telephone, talking to a good friend of mine down in the northern part of St. Augustine, Florida, in which I may create a ripple by me saying this, but I'm going to go ahead and repeat what he said pertaining to cancer victims. Did you know that they have a element that ordinarily you give horses that basically will knock out any form of cancer that a person has for pennies on a dollar, according to what Mr. Otto was telling me yesterday morning, whenever I called him, or the day before yesterday? Pennies on a dollar. What we give horses could be implemented to the human race that would basically knock out cancer. Whenever he was telling me this, I couldn't believe what he was saying. And I'm thinking to myself, you know good and well, some of these scientists, some of these doctors had to have already witnessed this or noticed this, that could have moved in that area. But once more, it's kind of like the tobacco industry. They knew that tobacco industry was causing cancer, and it was disruptive to people's lives, and especially those that was pregnant, carrying a baby. But they didn't really stay focused upon it because there was too much money being made by it. And it wasn't until, I guess, the 90s, until the journalists changed the formality of what they was trying to talk about regarding that. Now it's not, it may cause cancer. Now I think it's worded, it will cause cancer. In other words, they started calling it for what it needed to be called all along. And the reason why it wasn't called that all along was because of the big mega rich people millionaires, lobbyists. Same thing with your oil. Same thing with your medical industry. There's different things out there that Big Pharma knows that a cheaper product or another product would do just as good, if not better, but because it's going to affect their pocketbooks, they refuse to let out that information. Now, I was told, I don't know how true this is, that there was vehicles being created in the 60s and 70s and 80s that people was smart enough to figure out how to go from, let's say, an average automobile that could get 20 miles to the gallon to 60 miles to the gallon, because they modified the carburetor, or they done this, or they done that, or they added a weight, or they added a magnet, or whatever. I was told that a lot of those people, they was bought out by the big oil mega people, Shell, Valve, Exxon, and basically you had to sign a waiver, whatever money that they gave you that you agreed upon, that they bought out your patent and that it would never be brought up again, ever. Why did they do that? Did they do that in the interest of the public? Absolutely not. They done that in the interest of themselves. That way they could dig out more oil and sell more oil and make whatever that they make off of refining the oil out of the ground and then putting it in people's cars. That's why they done that. It would be a conflict of interest if they allowed for that stuff to go on in their eyes. In their eyes. That's the reason why I said what I said during Biden's administration, that if you're looking for these oil industries to back the backing on alternative energy sources, you'll be waiting until hell freezes over, because it's not going to happen. They're not going to cut their own throats that way. That's another reason why I say what I say, that a lot of these people need to go to jail. Need to go to jail, and those in Saudi Arabia needs to go to hell. Period. Sad, sad. We continue to keep seeing this again and again and again. Lessons will be repeated until learned, and we're not learning our lessons. Why? Why are we not learning? Why are we not seeking? You know, I'm going to end this. In me growing up, I was privileged to be able to almost watch every one of the original Star Trek sequences. And there was more to them seeking adventurousnesses in other parts of the galaxies, other than being nosy, other than snooping around or meddling in other galaxies' businesses. They was actually doing this to help the whole scale of things. Now, I realize this was Hollywood, but I'm just telling you what I've gotten out of watching all the sequences, that they was doing this in the betterment of humanity. That way we wouldn't destroy ourselves, or that colony of people living on that particular planet would not destroy themselves. And I've said this before, I'll say it again. One of the most touching sequences of Star Trek that I watched a 30-minute segment of, usually right after I got off the school bus. I had an opportunity to drink usually a half a glass of milk or a glass of milk and 2 ding-dongs before I had to change clothes and get out there and work like a dog, even at the age of 8, 9, 10 years old. You know, it wasn't nothing for us to get the heck beat out of us because we failed to turn out the lights when we left the room. Or it wasn't nothing for us to get the heck beat out of us because we spilt a glass of water or a glass of tea or a glass of milk while eating at the table. We was taught that as long as we was putting our feet under the table, our dad was in control of our lives, that he brought us into this world and that he could take us out. I realized that all that stuff that he was trying to teach us on the basis of fear, of respecting parenting, was brutal. It was psychological brutal, not counting the physical aspect of it. But the part that I'm saying about Star Trek is that they had come back to Earth and they beamed down. This was after a nuclear holocaust had taken place, and almost every ounce of life was completely gone. Completely gone. And it was a horrifying scene in and of itself. But they found life. I don't know if they had the right instruments or whatever. This, once more, this is Hollywood. And they found a colony of people that was at arms with one another. They was basically at war with one another. And what they was at war with one another wasn't survival, but they had come across the American Constitution and an American flag that had been left over. Everything else was totally destroyed, basically in smithereens. And they felt, this one colony, a group of people, felt like that you had to be really privileged to have access to that flag and to that Constitution. And that's what was causing the war or the fight between the two people. It wasn't but like 30 or 40 of them, and they was like the only people left on the planet, according to the way that the segment was going. But they was going to keep on until they was basically going to even destroy one another in that formality. And it took somebody like Captain Kirk and Spock to come beam down and to recite the Constitution of we the people, to bring acknowledgement to their understanding of their ignorance that the Constitution was not meant for just one particular sector of people, or one particular person, or one particular king, or one particular whatever, that the Constitution was for everybody to live by. And did you know that was so devastating in my life? I remember crying. And I couldn't have been much over 10, 11, 12, 13 years old. Keep in mind that I had a very rocky childhood. Didn't really even have a childhood. You know, didn't nobody read to me no bedtime rhymes while I was trying to go to sleep. A matter of fact, at the age of 10, I was driving a 2-ton truck out here hauling hay and driving tractors and mowing yards, just like if you was 16, 17, 18 years old. I didn't really have a childhood, which once more, I think that's wrong, because things was pushed upon to our little undeveloped minds to the degree that we really didn't develop correctly. Kind of like what I was talking about a while ago, as far as the children over in the Gaga Strip that is done without food for this long of time, that's basically starving to death. You can tell by looking at them that they're malnutritioned. That in and of itself is going to be damaging to those children to the degree that if you started feeding them 3 meals a day right now, out of all 5 food groups, the damage is so substantial, a lot of them won't never get over what's already been done. It's called depletion in their bones. It's caused depletion in a lot of their organs. It's called depletion in their minds. They won't be able to develop like they should. Now, friends, I know what I'm talking about. And you can continue to ignore the Windmill Ministries missions all you want, because you've been ignoring me now for 30 some odd years. But as you're ignoring me, keep in mind that the fault is going to fall upon to the feet of those that do hear me, that could have responded, that could have reacted in a much more positive form, but chose not to. And right now, I'm talking to Kenton, Tennessee. I'm talking to Obion County. I'm talking to Weakley County. I'm talking about the surrounding 15 counties that I live around, and those that had a form of education that could read and write, that could understand the things that I'm talking about, especially with biblical Bible prophecies, that one day you're going to be held accountable for these things, Tommy Moore. You're going to be held accountable for these things, Mr. Judge Pence, and all these other law enforcement people that want to snigger and laugh pertaining to this individual that has struggled, that have been terrorized from day one, since the first day I was born. At the age of about 2 weeks, had a kidney removed, which at that time was considered unprecedented in 1961 to operate on an infant at that age. So I've been fighting. I've went through trials and tribulations. I went through these challenges again and again and again, not only physically but also emotionally. Not only emotionally, but also spiritually. I've also went through challenges pertaining to financially. I mean, today, to this day, I still count every ounce of water that I put through the sink. And if it's not necessary for me to put it through the sink, I don't put it through the sink. In other words, I'll take water from this area that ordinarily people throw away, and I'll put it in a dog pan. I change my dog pan about once a week. I make sure that he's getting good water. I mean, you can tell by looking at him right here that he's just lacking for attention and lacking for food. You can tell by looking at him that he's just doing without, can't you? I mean, look at that lazy scoundrel. What a mutt. Ain't that right, Jackie? Jackie Smacky? You get treated good, don't you, Smack? Don't you, Jack Smack? You get treated good, don't you? Look at him stretching. He's going to get up. He's got his ear folded up. Put your ear down. Put your ear down, Jackie Smacky. Anyways, I think those that do hear the things that I'm talking about, he got beautiful eyes, don't he? Beautiful, beautiful brown eyes. Those that do have an opportunity to listen to me, I hope that they can comprehend the things that I'm talking about. And even though it may sound brutal, even though it may sound cruel, even though it may sound cold or indifferent, I'm trying to tell you the truth and trying to help you to bring awareness to the masses. That way we won't become extinct. That way there will be hope for tomorrow, if not for myself, because I'm 64 years old. Maybe it'll be hope for my granddaughter and possibly her children, providing that she lives long enough to have any. But there'll be hope for a better tomorrow for them. Thank you for listening. Good luck to all of us. God bless America. God bless our troops. And heaven help us all. And as I say, and I'll say again, shalom. Ain't that right, Jackie Smacky? Huh? Ain't that right, Jackie Smacky? Watch this. I pat the couch. He comes up here. He likes to come up here and love on me. He get real close to me over here. He'll sneak up right on my leg right here. And he'll put his head over there. There he goes. There you go. Yeah. Yeah. You know who your daddy is. You know who your master is. He's a very emotional dog. I've never seen an animal. This is a Great Pyrenees mixed with a white full-blooded German Shepherd. I've never seen or had an animal that was this intelligent to the point that you can talk to him like I'm talking to him right now. And he basically, I don't know that he understands every word that I'm saying, but he knows that I'm talking to him. And he knows whenever we're talking about him. I can even be on the phone talking to somebody, just like I was towards making this video, and I started talking to him. Next thing you know, he roused it up. He knew that I was talking about him. Yeah. Very intelligent. Very, very intelligent. So the teaching methods of the fear tactics in trying to beat love or beat respect into your children, we know is an incorrect way about trying to teach them. I just pray to God for those that are doing so much suffering right now, regardless whether it be because of the natural catastrophes, the forces of nature, or it be because of other brutality events that has occurred. I just pray that they will prosper and live long, just as Spock used to always tell. God bless and shalom.